Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. If this looks familiar to you, well, it should. We're at Mugello, and this is the Ferrari F2004. Why are we doing this again? We're doing this again because ASR yesterday have released version 0.2 beta of their Ferrari F2004 for Assetto Corsa, and for the very, very reasonable donation sum of €1.50, you too can get your hands on this latest creation of ASR. So far from what I've been able to tell, it looks like we're dealing with mainly small visual improvements and other architectural changes to bring this car up to date with Assetto Corsa 1.8, which has come out for PC in conjunction with the console release of Assetto Corsa for PlayStation 4. On the outside, we're talking about very, very minor visual refinements. Those exhausts look a little bit different to me. I think the geometries maybe have been changed a little bit, and they don't look as shiny as they did before, but otherwise things look very, very similar. I would also like to thank ASR because they had the kindness to feature my first review of this car, version 0.1, on their Facebook page last week, so that was rather humbling for me because I really enjoy their work, and apparently they thought enough of mine to be representative of their product, so thank you very much for that. It was a rather humbling experience. I'd also like to point out, remember I made a comment about the wheel nuts. On the F2004, there were wheel nuts, obviously on all four wheels, but they were different colors from one side of the car to the other. So, look at the wheel nuts here. On the left-hand side, they're red, and we go over to the right-hand side, and they're blue. Haha. I don't know if it was me who pointed that out to them, but I did mention it, and it has been corrected in version 0.2, so that is very, very cool. Also, what has been corrected, and I didn't notice this for my first review of this car, but it didn't burn fuel before, and it's also something that you'll find on the MP4 6.1 beta that was released yesterday as well. That car does not burn fuel at all. This one now does, and obviously, it helps with the realism, because now you're burning fuel just like everything else. We're not talking about a zero-emissions F2004 anymore, so plan accordingly for your races. In the cockpit, we have, I think, more of the same as we had previously. There really wasn't any need to make any adjustments to what was going on in the cockpit as far as I'm concerned. Everything looked great. Everything functions the way it's supposed to. There's absolutely no concern of mine for the cockpit, and otherwise I don't think there have been any other real noticeable changes made. Of course, under the skin, I'm sure architectural changes were made for version 1.8 of AC, but I don't know anything about that. So we'll take it for a short drive. I'll show you that the fuel does in fact burn down. The bottom screen on the steering wheel, we're showing 40 liters right now. That will tick downward as we drive the car. Engine's fired, still idling at 3790. Everything feels pretty much normal there. Dump the clutch in, first gear, raise the revs a bit, and off we go. Fuel's ticking down to 39 liters already. Being a little careful here on the outlap because we were sitting in the pits for a little while. Tires and brakes have completely lost their temperatures. And there we go. Another thing I wanted to mention, but I was looking for an appropriate segue. It is now possible in this version to over-rev the engine. Right now I have it set up on the default setup, so it defaults to 100% on the engine power limiter, which of course is what you would want to run, but you can see that when you're running at 100%, you can over-rev the motor. See, I'm shifting to those green lights that come up on the steering wheel. Have a look. There. And you see when you shift to those green lights, unless you hit them exactly right, you'll over-rev the motor, and then you'll get the vehicle status indicator come up, saying that you're doing damage to the engine. I wouldn't exactly call that a bug, but I would call it a slight annoyance, because you should be able to run the car at 100% of its capacity without doing damage to it. And of course, this is not true for every car in the real world, definitely, and it's not even true for every car in Assetto Corsa. The 98T that comes stock with the game is famous for blowing itself up after about 4 laps at 100% boost. But the F2004, it's a much more polished device than that. So I'm not entirely sure what all that's about. It does make you be careful, though. You can see, though, still plenty of speed. Handling-wise, nothing feels too much different from version 0.1. Force feedback, a couple of you made some comments on my first review of this car that I was clipping a lot through the corners, and as you can see, that's still the case. I have ratcheted back the force feedback a little bit, but to be honest, it feels good to me. It's the kind of thing where you'd have to drive it with my particular setup in order to understand, because I'm running a stock Logitech G27, and a lot of other sims, when I clip, I really know it. The thing wants to rip itself out of my hands, but so far, in this car, or in AC in general, that's really not the case. I know in iRacing, for example, if I'm clipping, that thing is just ferocious, but AC doesn't seem to do that, so I'm happy with where my force feedback is. I tend to like heavier steering anyway, so that's what you get. You see what I mean, though, about that rev limiter being annoying. I should not be damaging the engine by running it at high revs within the rev range. I mean, I'm not even hitting the rev limiter, and it says I'm doing damage, so again, it's a criticism, but a light criticism. Another thing that's certainly not changed from version 0.1 to 0.2 is the power that this thing generates. 950 horsepower from that V10 behind me. It just moves the earth along underneath it. The car is actually at a standstill. We're actually altering the rotation and trajectory of the earth around the sun. Such is the grip. It is just so quick. Absolutely the best car I've ever driven. And I've driven a lot of Formula 1 cars and a lot of sims. This takes the cake. I mean, it's a stark contrast to yesterday. I ran the Italian Grand Prix in iRacing and managed to finish 6th. But McLaren MP430 was an absolute bear the entire time. I managed to finish the race with no incidents somehow, but every corner was a fight. This thing, it's poetry. are down to 21 liters of fuel remaining, so that fuel burn is real, folks. Welcome to physics. Conservation of mass. I always like it when a mod respects the law of conservation of mass. It's just so pretty. Oh, I feel myself starting to get carried away here. I wanted to keep this video a little short because I'm not really bringing you any new content here, just an update on things you've already seen. The default setup here, still understeery, as you'd expect. Of course, this is for reasons of accessibility for perhaps some less experienced players. Say if you're reasonably experienced, you're going to have no problem whatsoever with this thing, and you're going to want to dial out that understeer as quickly as possible because there's speed to be had for sure. Oh, this thing's going to get me in trouble. To say though, we've been tickling the engine there on the upper end of the rev limit, and doesn't seem like we've done any damage to it. I don't see a hint of yellow there in the status indicator. And now we've got a low fuel light flashing there on the lower left on the bulkhead. So, in the pits with us. 14 liters left. Well, folks, there is the F2004 in beta version 0.2 by ASR. Link in the description, asrformula.com. €1.50 donation, and then this car is yours for all of your Assetto Corsa driving pleasure. I have to say, it is a logical facelift of the already brilliant F2004 that ASR gave us, and to be honest, I don't know why this thing is still in beta because I don't see anything wrong with it. As with all of ASR's products, if this were proper payware, as in they charge you $29.95 for this, I don't think too many people would complain. But the fact that they do this essentially for free, they still maintain that the 1.0 and above versions of all of these cars are going to be free. They only ask for donations if you want to drive them in beta. But it's just unreal. Absolutely unreal. These guys have so much talent. They are so good at this, and they do it all in their spare time, essentially for nothing. I'm pretty sure that the donations that they get probably just barely cover the costs of renting the server space and maybe for some coffee. So, thank you so much to ASR, because they're doing something here for Formula 1 fans and Assetto Corsa fans that needed to be done a long time ago, and now they're bringing us some wonderful cars. We've got the F2004, we've got the FW14, we now have the MP46, we've got all the Ferraris from the 90s. It's just incredible. They're working on the Benetton B191, working on the 91 Minardi as far as I'm aware. So, good days ahead for Formula 1 fans in Assetto Corsa. Version 0.2 of the F2004 just speaks to that, and it speaks volumes. It's just miraculous. So, thank you very, very much for watching. Fireman601 saying, we'll see you next time.